Hi, and welcome to the Blurry Turtle Podcast. Today's podcast has no sponsor because it's 2 a.m. and I'm in a hurry to post this. So, Sabalenka with a tough early round, tough first set against Masarova. Masarova was playing really well, serving well. Similar scoreline to the last time they played. Masarova did really well in one set, went to overtime. Good win for Sabalenka, sets up a pretty simple match. Kudermetova got a forfeit from Parithas Diaz, and she's not really playing that great, so you kind of think Sabalenka wins that one fairly easily. Kudermetova can serve decent sometimes, but not as big as Masarova, so it's a pretty safe matchup, I think, for Sabalenka. Elsa Giacomo with a great win against Puskova. Being able to hit through her lends itself to her hitting through Fernandez. They did play once before, and Fernandez won. So, that's the only data point there. I think, Giacomo is playing really well. Getting to a new level this season, I think. Just feels like Fernandez will be able to defend. She just beat Marino fairly easily. This is going to be a tougher match. Fernandez has had some letdowns. She does play well in these conditions, though. So, I'm expecting a decent showing. So, Fernandez in 3 is kind of what I expect there. I don't think Giacomo gets shut out here. I do think, conditions, experience, and a bit of crowd support will help Leylah. Mertens should beat Sun in 2 straight sets. Mertens played really well against An. Sun had an injured opponent, kind of outlasted her. The lefty attack is good, but Mertens spreads her backhand well, has a lot of difficult slices to deal with also, and I feel like Sun is a bit error-prone at this point. So Mertens in 2. Buksha played excellent. Claire Liu really had some big points, played them all poorly. Errors compounded. She got a bit rattled. Didn't really need to lose 2-1. Could have been close. She could have gone up a break early in the second. But, just not a great showing out there. Played pretty safe at times. Kind of wanted to work her way into the match, and Buksha was just swinging for the fences right away. Christina's playing well. It's an interesting match for Ayala. Ayala obviously just outlasted one of the best, offenses in tennis. So I think she beats Buksha also. Christina maybe a better mover than Tauson. Maybe a bit more stamina. But, maybe I'm not reading enough into the scoreline of Liu and Buksha, but it just felt like Liu kind of lost the plot and made a lot of errors, and also Buksha was hitting the ball with bigger margins but more topspin, so it was easier for her to just kind of hit the ball big and profit, but it just felt like an avalanche situation for Liu where every little mistake just added to the next one. Ayala's not going to give Buksha that. She's going to make her play a lot. She's going to defend well. She was hitting her forehand well the round before, serving well. I like her to win in 2. I was a little surprised. I did check the odds, and I did see, she was only like a -150 favorite, I think. Maybe I'll get surprised. I'm happy with that. Buksha's game, when she's playing excellent, when she's playing her best, is in that top 30, that 20 to 30 range. And it's great to see. So I'm very happy for her to get there. I think she's still improving too. So interesting matchup. I just think Ayala's a little better. Ayala was down and out in that match. She was down 5-1 in the third. And, to her credit, she played well. But, every match she put on the board, the crowd just got a bit more, what's a nice way to say obnoxious? They just made a ton of noise and interfered and it's good to support your players, but you should have a limit. You should, if you're just willing to support them at any cost, and if your behavior, I think this is what happened, if your behavior becomes more out of line, if it's situationally dependent, if it's a big point, so you're willing to shout during the rally. If it's a big point, so you're willing to cheer for a double fault. If it's your player's losing, so now you're willing to, heckle the other player. It's stay home. Stay home. It's a great environment, but you're being kind of fucked up, and it's not ideal. Towson handled it well. She's really calm throughout. But you would hope. I guess that's part and parcel for the tournament. People go, oh, the New York crowd is rowdy. They say the Aussie crowd is rowdy, but there's a difference, I think, between rowdy and trying to influence the match. You can try to influence the match with your support. You can get involved, but I just thought it was not great. If I were cheering for Towson there, or if I were part of her camp, I'd be pretty upset at the way people behaved. Rybakina Valentova is a great match. I think for Valentova it's a not yet situation, since Rybakina is serving well. When she's serving well, it really doesn't matter who you are. You're only 50-50 against her. So given that she hits the ball as big as Valentova, I think it's going to be tough for the qualifier to really do a lot here. Great win for her against Bronzetti. I think Valentova makes her way on tour by this time next year. I think she'll be direct into the draw. She hits the ball huge on both wings and goes big, has a good serve. There's nothing really wrong or missing from her game. Not a ton of slices, but she doesn't really need them yet. So this will be very, very interesting. If Rybakina plays poorly, Valentova hits the ball big and almost always to the open court. So, Rybakina doesn't move that great. And when you force her wide, she can sometimes struggle with length. She can sometimes send the ball long. So it could get interesting, but, she should win. I'm not saying a lot, saying she should win. I just think it's a very tricky spot for her. Should win in 2 close sets. Raducanu playing really well. Beating Shibahara 1-2 after the way she played in qualifying is very impressive. Gets another, tremendous qualifier here in Janice Tien. Tien, beating Veronika Kudermetova is, a really solid win. That's a player who was in the finals last week. So, just tremendous showing from Tien here. And, sometimes I would say that she could beat Raducanu. Tien has a really good forehand. Hits it sharply inside out. Great slice backhand, kind of like a Ash Barty style approach to the game. And similar timing, honestly, on her shots. She really has a smooth game. I just think Raducanu might have a bit too much power for her right now. And Raducanu is obviously comfortable in these conditions. She's been playing slightly better every month this year. So coming in good form, she should be a little bit more, a little bit more durable and have a few more chances. I think Tien has to play her best throughout in order to stay close. And it'll be interesting to see, if she can. Listen, if she can, she has a great game. Like, her ceiling is unestablished here, especially beating Kudermetova. It's hard to say, where she maxes out. Tien has a good tee serve from the deuce court. Overall, a great game. Just, been competing at that lower level, and I think Raducanu's ball striking when she's playing well is a thing that is hard to defend against. So I think Tien's, defense may break down. Kessler Vondrousova, I think, will be very close. Kessler had a good win against Linette. Vondrousova with a close one against Selekmateva. 2 lefties can always be tricky. Vondrousova, I think, just beat Kessler 6-1, 7-6 in Wimbledon. I thought Kessler might do a bit better there. I think here it's better conditions for her. Obviously, playing at home, you get the crowd support. But The slices that Vondrousova has pay more dividends on grass. I think it'll be hard for her to score here on Kessler. I think Kessler drives the ball well and tends to play better as the match goes on. So, chance for an upset here. Vondrousova is a flight risk randomly in tournaments. Hasn't really been so dominant on hard court really ever, unless she serves well. So, if she's not serving well, I think this is pretty even. If Vondrousova serves well, she has the better delivery. Kessler's not really doing a ton on her serve other than, putting the ball. She's more of a spot server, but not a ton of pace. So I think, Vondrousova wins in 3 most of the time. If she has a bad day, I like Kessler. I know it's illegal to pick 2 people, but sorry. I picked 2 people. They're both going to win. Jovic and Paolini had 3 sets in Indian Wells. Paolini won. This should be close too. I think Paolini's playing much better here than she was early in the season. Close match, close second set with Destiny Aieva. I don't really knock that because Aieva's, has a ton of power. I think that's where Jovic can hang with Paolini, but I think she just, doesn't have a way to score quickly. And, in the end, I think Paolini just kind of will drag her out. So Paolini and, I lean more towards 2 than 3 here. Jovic is a really, really good player, but, the loss to Ann Lee last week and a few others have shown that, her game is there, but she's not physically dominant yet. So every single match is kind of 50-50. Even Sasnovich, she's expected to kind of dominate things, but won a very close tiebreaker in the first. Pegula should beat Blinkova in 2. It's a situation where you expect Pegula to kind of walk through this draw early on. She is one of the favorites, I think, for the tournament, just because the conditions are really good, no pressure on her, and she's playing decent, she's healthy. So, Blinkova with a good win against Erudubtseva, but got the benefit of a bunch of errors. Blinkova does, I think, have 1 win against Pegula quite some time ago, but I'd kind of discount that. I expect Pegula to win there. Azarenka, leads the head-to-head against Pavlyuchenkova, but, she's not playing great. I didn't love what I saw from her against Inoue, and has been losing a handful of matches lately. After the first round, I like to discount kind of what I've seen in the recent history. The landscape is different. Everybody's in a brand new level. You kind of just accept the level they show in the first round as what they're going to bring, unless there's more in the tank. I think Azarenka will struggle a bit with Pavlyuchenkova's power. Pavs was down against Yastremska, and it wasn't a collapse from Yastremska. Pavlyuchenkova just started playing really well and stayed at that level. So I think her power will be a factor here. I think Azarenka is a little bit vulnerable right now, not automatic on defense. So I think Pavlyuchenkova wins, a close one, maybe another 3-setter. Samsonova, Hahn should be good. Priscilla Hahn played really well. Solid first round win for her. That's any first round win at a major is good for her at this point. She's still kind of trying to solidify herself, as a player inside the top 100. She has a good serve, big forehand, just not really able to put away some of the tougher baseliners. So, this is a tough matchup. She has basically a smaller version of Samsonova's game. So I like Samsonova, early loss to Yuan in the first set, but she kind of righted the ship, and getting through that tough opening round match sometimes frees you up to play a little better. So I like Samsonova in 2. Maybe 1 set will be close if Hahn serves well. And Lee with a good comeback win, plays Bencic now. I thought Bencic might be a little bit vulnerable, but she really shut down Zhang's offense. So I think she'll have a similar answer for Lee. Lee has very aggressive ground strokes when she's playing well and a pretty good serve. I think Bencic just, is going to be able to respond. She's pretty good defensively. Bencic is a player kind of like Mukova, different style of play, obviously, but they both are really good in the rally. They both are really good at just putting the ball back even when you're hitting good shots. So I think Lee will wind up making a few too many errors and lose that. Navarro winning a match is almost a surprise at this point. She's been struggling. So beating Wang Yafan is excellent. Playing McNally now is going to be tricky. McNally played a really good first round match. The trouble I have with saying that McNally wins outright is she doesn't really win at this level. She doesn't tend to beat, the top players. Also, her style of game, it's not really explosive. She's not acing you. It's a lot of baseline rallies. It's a lot of grinding. It kind of reminds me of a more powerful volley nets type play, where she can if you're making errors, McNally's going to beat you every time. But if you're not making errors, it's taken her 5-6 shots to score. So against Navarro, that becomes tricky because Navarro has more power, slightly better serve. I think it'll be very close. I'm sort of expecting Navarro to win in 3 because that's, what she does. And because, if it takes a long time for McNally to win, the chances of Navarro playing herself into form are a bit better. So it should be close there, though. If I were, I would never be going in to kind of confidently say that Navarro was going to win. It just feels like it's her match to lose, though. Yeah, listen, if McNally, just to circle back, if McNally wins in straight sets, wouldn't really be surprising given Navarro's run of play, nor the first round. Yafan has not been playing that great. So Uchijima played excellent against Danilovic. It's a shame she runs into Krejcikova right now. Barbara Krejcikova is playing tremendous. Mboko had a slight wrist issue, but all credit to Krejcikova. She just hit her forehand tremendous. She just hit the ball big throughout and didn't really make errors. Normally she starts off a bit slow, but she didn't here. So, she should beat Uchijima. Uchijima is a player, it doesn't really matter if you should beat her, though. She still competes well. She hits the ball big. She's serving decent. The match against Danilovic was extremely high. Maybe one of the higher level matches of the first round. So interesting to see her going uphill here. She could beat the bad Krejcikova. That one just doesn't seem present, though. I'm interested to see. I think Uchijima is hitting the ball harder on average, on her average ground stroke than Mboko. Mboko goes with a bit more shape. She'll hit the ball flatter. She'll hit some shots inside out on the forehand. Really looking to maneuver the ball into tough spots rather than hitting the traditional style. And I think that made things a little easier on Krejcikova. Mboko's a great mover too, so if she leaves the ball hanging for a second, it's usually not a disaster. But Krejcikova was able to hurt her from there. I think Uchijima hitting the ball a little harder will make it tougher for Krejcikova to create. So I'm interested to see, if she can do the same thing here. If she can, it starts to get scary for the draw. Krejcikova can beat anyone. So good stuff. Good to see her playing well. I do think she wins that in 2 close sets. But, if it's a blowout, that's, a little frightening. It's not crazy to blow out Uchijima, but when she's playing that well and you do it, very impressive. Same with Mboko. Mboko really didn't play bad and, could only win 5 games. Townsend played Ostapenko last year in Toronto and won 2-1. So definitely an opponent that she'll feel confident against. And Townsend played really well against Ruzic. She made some errors, but didn't back off from her shot making. I watched her miss an overhead, and then the next play she went for a drive volley out of the air that I didn't think she should. I thought she had time to let it bounce, but went for the drive volley, missed it in the net. Very next point, went for a drive volley again, landed it. Very next point, another overhead. She cooked it. smoked it. I think that was the key. Ruzic was earning the errors that you normally might get with Townsend, but Townsend didn't waver in her confidence, I think, because she's been playing a bunch of tennis and she's hitting the ball well right now. When you're seeing the ball like that and you're an offensive player, you just, you don't back off. And I think Townsend doesn't really have a reason to either because, nothing really to lose here. Not a ton of pressure. And if you think players are trying to outlast you, might as well go for your shots. So I think her offense is going to be able to score on Ostapenko, but the opposite is kind of true. Ostapenko should be able to score on her, and Ostapenko just played another very strong lefty in Jin Wang. So I think it's a close match for me. I would picture it going 3 sets, simply because even though Townsend is playing really well, and had that big win last year, I think, the errors are still there, and Townsend's not the best mover. She does look in pretty good shape this year, honestly. Best shape she's been in a while, especially, getting really, really fit post-pregnancy is extremely impressive. Should be a good match. I think I like Townsend but I think I like her in 3. Ostapenko's offense is just hard to deal with. If Townsend's not landing first serves, I think she could be in a little bit of trouble in a set. Potapova, Andreeva, pretty excellent match. I like Andreeva. Parks, I thought, didn't play that poorly against Andreeva, just couldn't score at all. Andreeva, makes every court look like a slow court. She just is able to run down everything and put the ball back with depth. And, if you're not a threat to win the tournament, it doesn't seem like you can beat her. Potapova, played herself into form against Zhu, but not really at the level lately where I would expect her to get this done. So that, I think, is actually it for tomorrow. Or is it? It doesn't really make sense. Stick with me a second, because they might have split the draw. Nope. That's it. Huh. Well, I guess I should probably stop talking now. But if you've made it this far, you probably want more. Now, you probably don't, actually. I should probably cut this off because I'm just rambling at this point. Yeah. All right, bye. Are you still there? All right, I'll go. Bye.